First question is, what's the payment range after you graduate from the program?
So depending on what you're doing, if it's like an internship or maybe your first entry-level job, it's going to probably be around 50 to 60,000. It could be a little bit more. There's a lot that depends on it because there's a huge latitude of different kinds of jobs that you could get in accounting. So.
That's great. So can it be like a big difference after a year when you graduate?
Yeah, again, depending on where you go and what you do, you could be getting normal pay raises of 1% to 2% up to like, depending where you go, 10, 15% pay raises. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And what are the educational requirements to get into the program?
Depending on what you want to do, you can get just an associate's degree and work as a bookkeeper and do the basic accounting for a company. Or if you want a little more education and get a bachelor's degree, and with that you can become what's called a CMA, a Certified Management Accountant. And then you would have higher level responsibilities in larger companies or small companies too. Then you can actually get a master's degree, and when you get a master's degree, you could be licensed to be a CPA, and that's when you do auditing and other things that are required by law that you have a CPA license to do those. So,
sure, good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Mrs. Harrison, you just mentioned about licensing in the accounting program. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I mentioned two, CMA or CPA. So I'm going to get a little techie here. A CMA is a certification. So it'll just shows that you have a body of knowledge and it shows that you've got that expertise. A CPA is a license. That one is controlled by law, and you have to have that by law to do certain types of accounting work. But there are other things you can do too. If you're interested in tax, you can do what's called an EA. If you're interested in doing internal controls and internal auditing, you can do a CIA. But there are a lot of different kinds of certificates you can get, and they just prove that you have a certain body of knowledge that relates to the area that's of interest to you, and it increases both your education about it and your marketability out there.
And in your opinion, your experience, do you think that there is like a specific skill required to get into the program?
Everybody thinks accountants have to be math nerds, right? Isn't that what everybody thinks?
That makes sense.
But actually, math is a very small part of it. Accounting is a lot of laws, rules and regulations, taxes. People think of that. That's a lot of rules and regulations, and a lot of other accounting is too. So you actually need to have a body of knowledge about these rules and regulations. You have to know some math. You have to feel comfortable with computers. You have to feel comfortable working with data and being able to understand it, interpret it. And this is my key for accountants. Everybody thinks they can't communicate, but that's absolutely wrong. Accountants have to be excellent communicators because they have to explain really difficult concepts to people at all levels of a company, like the AP clerk up to the CEO. You've got to explain what's on your mind and what's happening in their terminology, and it's not always easy. So communication to me is key, being able to be a good accountant.
Excellent, excellent. That's really interesting, actually. And so you just mentioned something about like regulations and all the things like accountants need to know to explain other people. Can you go a little bit in depth with those regulations, like specifically?
Sure. And again, it relates to what area of accounting you want to go into. So again, it depends. If I go into tax, I've got to know the IRS code. I have to know how that works. If I become a financial accountant, then I need to know a lot about what the SEC does and the SEC regulations. For all accountants, they need to kind of understand what GAAP is. That GAAP is the way we practice accounting, so everybody has to know that. So again, there's a huge body of knowledge, and you'll get better at the area that you are interested in and that you decide is your career.
Talking about regulations makes me think about like, what are the ethical side or the ethical standards for accountants in this field?
That's a really good question. There's a really high level of ethical standards. As a matter of fact, part of your continuing education, you have to prove that you're continuing to educate yourself on ethical standards. Accountants are going to be able to have a lot of information about the company that's private about that company. You've got to be able to keep that information. Plus, in the best of all worlds, it would never happen, but you could be pressured into making some unethical decisions that might be beneficial to the company but aren't quite right. So you've got to, as a person, have a high set of ethical standards, but the profession itself also demands that you have a high set of ethical standards.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like sometimes we'll be in some like scenarios where it might like interfere with the ethics. And going to another side, like about like the use of softwares, what are like really specific softwares that accountants need to know or will learn in your program that will be essential for the field?
Okay, the basic everybody has to know in business is Excel. You just got to be native or really comfortable with Excel. But there are too many kinds of our specific software systems to name, but you're going to always be dealing with an automated accounting system, always. You're going to need to have familiarity with systems that will mine data and help you to create understand trends and interpret trends. So things like Power BI, Tableau is one that helps you to visualize that data that you've just played with. So there are a number of, especially analytical kinds of software that you need to be good with.
Awesome. For accountants, what are different paths or areas that you can specialize in the field or the
Okay,
whole?
great question. But again, it really depends on what you want to do. You could go into tax, you can go into audit, you go into management, accounting. Those are the things most people think of. You can go into internal controls, you can go into forensic accounting. That's a really cool one right now, everybody thinks. But in addition to those types of accounting, you can also think about what kind of business you want to work in. Do I want to work in a small business, medium business, large business? What industry do I want to work in? Do I want to be in aviation? Do I want to be in entertainment? Do I want to be in government, nonprofit? Everybody has to have an accountant. It's a saying that everybody kind of laughs at, but it's very true. You can own your own company and run your own company. I've done that. In addition, there are just things like, I never thought I would teach accounting. Never in my wildest dreams when I was a student did I think, someday I'm going to teach accounting. But that was open to me. So the avenues are just endless. It's whatever you want to make of this.
That's great. I think it's a great career then. And talking like the paths we can pursue after graduating, is there like any education that we can keep pursuing as an accountant?
So for like continuing education, things we need to do after we've become part
Yes,
of the profession?
like a master degree or something. Like what can you do like to keep educating yourself as an accountant?
Well, depending again on what you do, like if you get a certificate like the CMA or a license like the CPA, you're required to do continued education. You have to do it. And it's just to keep yourself current on whatever's going on. And it's just good to brush up on what you're a professional at. So not only can you, but you have to. Some of the areas that I thought were interesting, so I've continued my education in, were blockchain. I just think that's really interesting and wanted to know what it was doing. AI, which is becoming really interesting right now, is another area I just thought was really interesting, so I kind of kept current on what was going on. So you kind of can dictate what you want to be interested in, as long as it's pertinent to your
That's great.
job. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. As you just mentioned, with like different technologies, AIs, and different like stuff that you can keep learning as an accountant, and your expertise in the field, how do you see the accounting career and field changing in the next 10 years?
Well, technology is going to change it. I know a lot of people think like blockchain or AI is going to get rid of accountants, and that's not true. We just tend to make it a little more complicated, and we're the ones who have to understand how blockchain and AI and those technologies are helping us. But in the immediate future or immediate time, the accounting profession, you couldn't enter it at a better time, because we're all getting old and they're all retiring. And there aren't as many accountants replacing us as are retiring. So accountants are in demand, huge demand. So you can get almost any job you want.
Wow,
Yeah.
that sounds great for people that want to get into this field, actually. And how's, with your experience as well, on like, how is the work environment for accountants? How do they need to be related with in a company or in the whole field with different people?
Well, okay, so you could work in a very traditional office environment. We go 9 to 5, work in the same place. A lot of accountants work remote, or we'll do a hybrid where they're home sometimes and they're at work sometimes. But again, this is going to depend on what area you want to go into, because some accountants, I mean, if I'm in entertainment, I may end up having to go on site and be there. Or if I used to work for the US ski team, we would occasionally go to some of the venues where they would do some of their skiing. So it depends on the company, but traditionally, I'm going to say it's more of an office type position.
It looks like a really good environment.
Great environment. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
So welcome.
And you guys are invited to subscribe and like this video. And if you're more interested about the accounting program at Ensign College, please check the link in our description.